All right, so welcome everyone. Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning for those watching us through the internet. It's a pleasure to have all of you here. So today we're gonna have Mark talk about the living lamp, but before that, as usual, Rafael, we're gonna do the initial prayer reading for us. Right?
Hello, everybody. Morning.
Morning.
So the reading today is from the book Happy Life, from Divaldo Pereira Franco and Joana de Angelis. Advice is only valuable if you are willing to act on it. When you are in any type of difficulty, ask a more experienced, better equipped person for help and advice. But do not try to prove your own opinion correct. Listen with care. Think. And then take the decision that seems most suitable. On the other hand, do not disdain the orientation and advice that you get or are looking for either. Examine everything and keep what is good, taught the apostle in the name of the good. So I want to invite you all to close your eyes. Take a deep breath. Let's relax our minds for a moment. Try to disconnect from the problems that we have in our daily lives. Let us feel the blessings that cover us at this moment. The light and love that surrounds us. Let us feel this warmth in our hearts, relaxing our bodies and bringing harmony and peace to our spirit. Let's thank our Master Jesus for His instructions, for His teachings, that we will once more bring forth today, so that we can be reminded what the true Christian path is. Let us ask for our mentors to illuminate our brother Marco in his speech and to open our minds so that we can learn a little bit more once again. Thank you, and so be it.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
And good morning to everyone watching us online too. It's such a great pleasure to be here. And today we're going to talk about a very important passage. Gospels that we find in the Mark, John, Luke, and Matthew. They all talk about the same passage in different ways. And it's interesting that Jesus will bring that same idea of the light of the world, being the light or the lamp that provides the light to the world multiple times in both the recognized text in the Bible and the ones that are not completely recognized yet, but they're all talking about this. And obviously Jesus is using the idea of the light to represent a very important message to all of us. And that's what we're going to be talking about in the next 45 to 50 minutes. The first thing I want to show you guys is which is the first slide I have here. I don't have many slides, but I just have a few images that I want to make sure we're on the same page. We can continue talking about it. So this is an oil lamp. Not exactly like the ones that were used in the time that Jesus was incarnated here with us, but the design of the oil, the basic design of the oil lamp, has been around for thousands of years, and it's still used today, even in restaurants. Actually, I've been to restaurants before where they use a very modernized version of an oil lamp, which is basically a little pull of oil in a ceramic container, and some medium that will bring the fire onto that oil. It could be cotton, it could be paper, it could be so many different things that can provide the fire, the heat to the oil, so it will light up. What's interesting is they all have similar designs, and we still use them. So it's a very good image to represent a message. So Jesus used those images in a very precise way. So things that are commonly used, commonly available, everyone knows about them, and he could relay a message that is deep, that is important to all of us, with a very, very simple object or design. For example, an oil lamp. And another interesting thing about an oil lamp is that it needs oil. So by the time it provides the energy to generate light, it's actually given a little bit of itself. So it's burning. So that oil that is providing is just the energy that is sustaining that fire for many hours. So I just want you guys to keep that in mind too, because we're going to be talking about that. So there's always a donation or recycling of those energies in any aspect of the light that we're going to talk about today. And a little bit of the context of most of these passages, I just want to bring you back a little bit over 2,000 years ago, where most residences and houses at that time were based on a very simple design, which is like a one-room open concept design. So at that time, very different from today. Now I would say that some architects are going back to an open design concept, which is fancy and nice, I guess, for new houses. But for many years after that, we've been separating our rooms with walls in many different ways and sorts of kinds, so we can have different, designs in different rooms, different uses for different rooms, and this is something that our society has created and adapted for thousands of years. But at that time, basically the whole house was like a four-wall, no division type of setup, right? Very simple, very, very simple. One door, and that's pretty much it. So the basic idea was just for protection, right? So there's not a lot of, inside the house, there was not a lot of amenities that we have today. So we can, obviously it was a very different time in the evolution of our society in general. But now you can picture that if I actually lit up an oil lamp at that time inside that one room residence, the light would certainly reach all the places in that residence because there's no barriers against it, right? So that's why Jesus used this symbol in a again, like I said, in a very, very intelligent and very precise way of, when you light that single source of light inside a room or a house, it would bring light to all corners of that residence. So that's that's how Jesus, that's like the backdrop of what we're going to be talking about today, and we're going to move on now. And we're going to go through some of those passages in a minute. Another little background information, and I know I'm getting technical now, but I know being trained in science, like my friend here too, we always try to bring up a little bit of our experiences outside Spiritism, so we can try to bring a little bit more information and rationalize a lot of the information we have from the Gospels. Remember, that's exactly what Kardec was trying to tell us so many years ago, 150 years ago, saying, listen, the real faith, the one that's unshakable, will withstand any scientific evidence, any other information, at any time in the universe or any epoch of time. And the real faith has to be rationalized. So you have to think about what we know in science, what we know from our society, what we know from the gospel, and we have to interconnect those thoughts in a very organized way. So this is the spectrum of electromagnetic radiation, so EMR just for short. So EMR, there's a very long spectrum, as you can see here. The visible light, which is, every time we talk about light, because we're biased and we only really understand things that we can see in general. So light was considered only this little spectrum here, right, from the violet to the red, as you see there, because that's the one we can see. So our eyes are able to detect this particular frequency of the electromagnetic spectrum, And they transform that into something that we recognize as a color. So, by definition, light has no color. It's just a radiation. So our eyes interpret that in a particular way, so we break that down into particular color. So if you ask me, what's the color of something, what you're actually answering is, that's how your brain sees that particular wavelength. So color does not exist. Our brains recognize that, right? But that tiny little fragment in the spectrum, that's what we can't see. So, and for many years, now we know a lot more about radiation, but for many years, that's all we thought it was existing in the universe, right? All existed was all we can see. If you take that same information and put into faith and religion, it's exactly the same thing. For many, many, many years, we could only believe what we could see and touch. Do you guys remember anything like that in the Bible, for example? When his own apostles had to touch him to see, well, this is real, this is you. Or even if you go back even 1,000 years before Jesus, when the goddesses and divinities and the saints or the entities that were superhuman were all material. Because that's what they could see, right? So if I can see something that I cannot explain, in general, I decide by my brain that that's beyond my human existence, so that by definition, the divinity. So in the beginning, you can go back to Egypt, for example, you would stare at the sun. So certainly the sun was not created by me or by anyone in my family. So by definition, the sun is something that is totally above humankind, something that's unhuman. So by definition, that has to be something more powerful than I am. So if you follow that same line of thought, so sun is some kind of God. So there was the God Son. And at some point in that evolution, before Jesus, is all before Jesus, they've realized that, well, I can actually look at the sun and humanize it. So instead of looking at the sun as this source of light, I can actually give a human figure to this God. So I would create a humanized version of God. So like the classical old man with, looking like very intelligent and thoughtful. And they could be coming in forms of animal gods and human gods and variations of the theme. But in general, we've now, instead of selecting just material things, we're now coming like humanized forms of gods. But they're all like multiple gods. So again, remember that. The same way we believed for many years in science that all existed was what I could touch and see and replicate. In religion is the same thing. All that existed, all the goddesses and everything, was absolutely what I could see, touch, and replicate, basically. And then we come to the time of Jesus, when they finally realized that there was only one God possible, because if I have multiple gods, then things will be quite problematic. Because if they are all powerful and all the intelligence summarized in one individual, so if I had two, by definition, I don't have an all-powerful God anymore, because now they have to share that same intelligence and powerfulness with another God. So that was quite shocking philosophically for them to get to that conclusion. But that's the evolution of things. So this is light, as we know. That's what we call light. But in reality, the spectrum of radiation in general, it's enormous. And actually most of it we can feel, see, detect. And the spectrum here is what we can detect. Because likely there's a lot more in the EMR range and other types of radiations that we cannot even detect. There's one you guys know. When you get close to someone that you like, what do you feel? Like you really like. You get close to them. You don't need to touch, okay? So here I am, and I'm getting close to someone that I love dearly, right? Do I feel something different? What is that?
Happiness.
Yeah, something. Can I measure that? Is there a machine that I can put there and say connect to me? Maybe check my heart rate? I don't know. But there's always some type of exchange of energies that happen that are way beyond our ability to recognize, to feel, to see, or to measure. So we're still there. We're still working on that. See how it's expanded. Now we know that some of this can kill us because we ourselves created the experiments to do that. Gamma rays and things like this, and X-rays, by the way, remember the story of who first recognized them, ended up dying. But anyways, so we know a lot more about it, but this is again the backdrop of the grand theme of the day, which is the light, the living lamp, right? So I'll give you another example of things that we call, light in general, the images that we see, and how there's way more into that picture that we can actually not visualize, see, measure, or touch. Okay? I'll give you one example. So this is a campfire. I think most of us recognize that, and I borrow that from the Smithsonian magazine. There's an article on how to create a perfect campfire. It's an interesting article. But I borrowed the image of it, so we can actually have an idea of what I want to mention to you. So when you guys think about a campfire, what's the first thing comes to your mind? Yeah, exactly. We've got to warm up, right? It's an open campfire. It's probably getting cold, like this nice wind in the background, and you got to get close to the fire. So you can feel it. So heat, right? It's one spectrum of EMR, right? So you can actually feel that. The same heat you get from the oven, for example. You don't have fire sometimes, but there's the same type of radiation you get from there. What else? Light, exactly. So there's another spectrum of the radiation that actually you can see. Your eyes can see, tell you that. And the colors, again, that's the spectrum of this particular type of fire. It has a yellow light to it. That's how we recognize it. Okay. Now, I can think about another one. I can think about my friends. They're there with me. Because of the fire. We're all circling together. We do like a circle time, like in school. Right? Wine, too. Food, drinks. You name it. But I can think about the good vibrations that are embedded into this setting that cannot be measured, detected, or understood. Isn't it a great time when you have a campfire with your friends? So that type of energy is really unmeasurable. The setting, the understanding, what that brings to us. So the image of the fire represents a lot. The light, the energy. And that's exactly what Jesus was speaking at when we're going to talk about the passages now. There's a lot more to this than just the heat or the light, right? And we're going to get into that. So in John chapter 8, verse 12, he's going to say, Jesus saying, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. There's a lot we have to talk about here. So what he's saying is that Jesus is saying, I'm this light. But what kind of light is that? What is it talking about? Is it a light, like a campfire light? Is it a...
Everything.
Yes. This is a representation of a lot more than what we know as light. Right? He is the beacon of hope. He is what we need to look at and follow. He is the example. So that's the light. He's saying he's the example. So he personifies everything you need to know about the message of God. So he is that. He's not saying, he is that. You can just see what he's doing. You can feel it. Think about the feeling. How many books we have talking about spirits that, or incarnated spirits that were able to get even close to the presence of Jesus in describing what they feel. Isn't that amazing? Surreal. Think about getting close to the most evolved spirit that ever came even close to our planet. So whoever follows me, in other words, whoever follows the message that I represent and what I do, because that's what he was doing, will never walk in darkness. And again, darkness is the opposite of light. So he's playing really well with what people can understand. So now go back and think about the little lamp of oil being raised in a room, spreading its source of energy and powerful energy to everything around it. And the opposite of that is quite clear. Turn off the light. It's the confusion. It's the darkness. It's the lack of a beacon of an example. Right? So if you never walk in darkness, but will have the light of light. Light of life. So what he's saying is that same light that he's referring to is in me too. I have it. I can't see it. Right? I don't know it. But we have the potential to be all of that. And he's telling us, we'll have it. If you nourish it, it will grow. Just like a plant. If you put the right combination of water and right soil and food to the plant, it will grow. If you get the seed and put it in the right soil, it will grow. So if you follow the path of light that I'm showing you, your light will shine. It's exactly the same type of message. But now I'm going to tell you a story about me, Marco, and how, sometimes understanding those passages does not translate necessarily in actually doing it or anything close to it. So when I started studying Spiritism, not many years ago, but I would probably, say about 10 years ago, I was enlightened by it. So I could see the light on it. And I could actually understand it. It was quite interesting. And being from a, scientific background or research background, I finally was able to correlate the message from Spiritism with my own skepticism of religion. Because I always was a skeptic of anything. Because that's what I'm trained to. I'm trained to disagree and question. And eventually prove it right or wrong. But, that's how we're trained. That's our mindset. So if you tell me something, I'll try to make sure that that's real by having a philosophical approach to it that include methods, a hypothesis, a method, and I'll prove it right or wrong. That's how science teaches, right? So when I first read Spiritism, I went through Kardec as Kardec went through the messages. Because he was doing exactly that. He was trained like that too. So he had a method, he had a question, he had a hypothesis, and he had a method, well-defined method, and then he read and he, in the end, gave his conclusions, and I agreed 100%. But from understanding that and implementing that in my life, there's this enormous gap. And I think that goes back to a little bit of the darkness that Jesus is mentioning here. Because you cannot progress with the light of others alone. So what he's saying is that you need to follow me. You don't need to say, hey, that's Jesus, he's my friend, he lives with my neighbor, he's a great guy, he prays for me. We do that all the time, right? I have trouble. Whoa, wait a minute. Grandma, pray for me. Things are not good, okay? Thank you. I'll continue to do bad things, but you pray for me, so everything will be fine. Okay, thank you. Right? So that's what we do. Right? I don't change. I don't follow. I don't go by the rules. So remember, he's saying follow me. He's not saying recognize me. It's different. So my personal experience with Spiritism is exactly what that passage says, because I recognized it, I understood it, and I could give a lecture on it at any time. But taking that information and following it, what was he saying? That's a much bigger, steep step that you have to go through than most of the time we can even imagine. So when I returned to Canada, and I was here about 4 years ago, I'd say. By that time, I was already, coordinating the studies on Wednesday. I was giving the lectures on Sunday. I was, giving training other individuals how to do lectures, how to do the passes, about Spiritism and all the books. I've read all the books on Spiritism, and in my own egocentric maniac personality, I thought I was actually doing quite well. You know, hey, I know about this. And then God sent me a little test. He said, okay, wait a minute. That's great. You're going to talk about Spiritism Wednesday afternoons. Okay, fine. So let's do this. And I walk into the train, going back home, and there's this individual sitting. It was a completely empty train, and I was there with this odd individual, and he wanted to talk to me. But again, see, I was on the dark side of things, although I thought I was really bright. And he was obviously being through difficult times in his life. You know, he was not, the nice and clean, neat individual that you expect to see seated beside you all the time, right? This was quite the opposite of it. He was smelly, he was dirty, he was probably had some alcohol before, so he was not, he's not the type of personality that, we picture in our minds when we want to have a travel companion. But there I was seated, and then he came and sat beside me. And then he strikes a conversation. And the conversation was quite meaningless, but he was trying to ask me a lot of things, and I was really get upset about that situation. To a point that I was like, okay, I sorry, I have to go, that's my stop. It wasn't. I just moved to another train. To another car in the train. And then after that, of course, when you realize that you're doing that kind of thing, you say, okay, fine, I messed up. Got it. Okay. So I came here and talked about one of the passages of the gospel, and I gave this beautiful teaching for a lot of people. And then I realized, gee, that's exactly what I'm missing. Okay. So about a week later, here I am again, going back to by bus to Hamilton. This time by bus. It's a completely packed full bus. If anyone took the 16 bus back to Hamilton rush hour, you guys understand what I'm saying. So I find a spot to seat, and there's only one spot available in the train. It's actually beside me. And there's this homeless individual seated outside the train when I walked in. And I didn't think about anything, but when I got my seat, he came in the train and he sat beside me. So now it was actually a much more challenging situation for me than the previous one, because it was full of people. I couldn't move. And the individual himself was in a much poorer situation than the previous one that I met before. And he strikes up a conversation with me. And he was intoxicated. He was very loud. And that's when I actually had to think twice and said, listen, this is the second test in a week. I think I better do something now. And I've realized, and I thought about it. I was like, okay, Marco, you gotta do what you know what to do. And I at least was polite with this individual. I said, so what's it? And then he started telling me his story, his life story, out of nowhere. And everyone on the bus started to get upset with him because he was being loud. And then I realized, that was a beautiful message, because I realized exactly what I was doing a week ago. I was on the other side. I was upset with the guy. And I'm like, wow, why are these people being upset with this individual? And then I started talking to him, and then he started telling me, the challenges in his life. Because obviously I was judging him. You can even say you don't judge people, that's fine, but you do. It's just unconscious, so we all do. And then you realize that you do when you think about it. So when he starts talking with me, I realized I was judging him by the minute I saw him by the door to the bus. And the first thing I thought is that, is he coming in the bus? You think about it, don't you? And then I realized how bad those thoughts were, but I never really got the attention. I never caught my own thoughts at that time. I started to come in, together, feeling my own thoughts again. And he was telling me about the fact that, he's lost most of his family. He's been in the streets for so many years. He used to have a house. He used to have a family. And he's saying all this in a very intoxicated way, but he's very conscious about what he's saying. And he kept telling me, at the end of every sentence, he kept telling me, like, I want to go home. And I'm like, okay, so where's your home? And then he doesn't answer. It's like, I want to go home, and I want to go home, and I want to see my family. I want to see this person and that individual and that individual. I was like, okay, where are they? It's like, they're dead. Yeah, and that's exactly what I did. It's like, okay. So the conversation now shifted into a very different route, which is actually he was trying to take his own life. And going back home for him meant killing himself. That's when I realized that all of us here, we are the lights. And that's what he's going to say here. Matthew, you are the light of the world. That's Matthew 5:14. It doesn't matter if I told him that Jesus was a great guy and he was the light of the universe. Hello. This guy is bottom low on everything. Giving a speech to him about Jesus was useless. Showing my own love to him was the light. So I started talking to him. Like we do fraternal assistance here. That's exactly what I did. Like in a packed full bus going back to Hamilton. And I started talking to him about the challenges of life, the other ways around this. Sometimes that things happen to us that we cannot understand or explain, and we only see that in the future existences, in the future that we don't even know exists yet. And then I started talking to him. But he kept, insisting on the fact that he couldn't take it anymore. Like he wanted to meet these individuals that were already dead. And, we went through that conversation for about 35 minutes. And then right at the end, about 5 minutes going into the station, he tells me, I'll try to find my family. And he walks out of the bus. But now he's talking about his real family. That I ended up realizing that is actually from Brantford, which is close by. So I told him, go to Brantford. Go to Brantford. Don't try anything. Just and I realized he was actually not in a real suicidal mode. He had no plans. So there's a couple questions that you have to ask to make sure that I wouldn't have to call police when the bus arrived. That's part of my training too in the clinic. So I was able to realize it was not in high risk. It was like a very low risk, but we still had to do something. So we talked about it, and he. I helped him into the station to find tickets to Brentford, and we're able to put him back to Brentford so he could find a family. I missed my first test big time. Failure. 0. I thought I had the light inside of me somewhere. I was so blinded by my own blindness that I couldn't even realize how poor my decision was. And how bad I was acting, although I actually knew everything I was talking about. And then when the second chance, so God gave me a second chance, He does to all of us, I started to automatically implementing things that we know already. And at that time I felt that I was, at least in that brief 30 minutes I had with that individual, I was being the light for him. So a city in a hill cannot be hidden. No one lights a lamp and then puts it under a basket. Me. That's exactly what I was doing. And I was teaching others about this. And I was doing exactly that. I was putting my light under a basket all the time. And I was taking it off for convenience. We go through this. Mark, who actually wrote one of the pastors that we're going to talk about, went through this. He was invited by Paul to go on a journey with them to deliver the message of Jesus. He was a young man at that time. His mother actually asked Paul to take him and Barnabas, so they went on the road with him. And he knew what the plan was. Go through the desert walking alone, trying to figure out how to eat, being stoned in cities, fleeing from persecution. That's what Paul was doing, right? Everyone understands that. When we say that Paul was traveling to deliver the good news, that's beautiful. But in the real world, he was walking thousands of miles on foot without anything in him other than his faith and his love of God and the Word of God. So he would walk in cities. He would start to. He was very good at working cotton and things, and preparing drapes and things like this. He was very good at that. So he would do that to support himself during that time and period when he was in a place, and he would help others. He would teach. He would lecture. He would be persecuted, stoned. He had to flee. You know that story. He's done that multiple times. So Mark was invited to do that. It didn't last that long. So in about a third into the road, when they decided to go to Capernaum, which is even very far away from where they were, Mark decided to head back. He thought that they were going too away from the law, which was the general accepted laws of the Judaism, which is the laws of the temple. All of them were raised in Judaism and laws, and they all knew the laws very well. So he realized he thought they were not doing the right thing. He was starting to be against them, and he didn't want to go to that journey. That was kind of suicidal in his head. He said, "You know what? I'll go back," and he did. Right. So he was called. But he couldn't follow his own mission. He decided he was weak. He stepped back into the darkness, only to realize when he went back that he messed up big time, and he had to redo it again. And he did. He did, to a point that he was called by Paul to Rome to help him with the word and with Christianism, early Christianism. So Paul recognized his efforts to change himself, and he did that. For every single one of us here, we will at some point hide our lights, our lamps. We will. Period. Even if you don't think about it, even if you do it consciously or unconsciously, we have the light, we have the energy, we have this endless stream of love that raises from God and falls through us. We have it, and we will hide it. I can give tons of examples of that. How many times in my work before I felt it was quite appropriate to deny the fact that I believe in Jesus. Not deny, but do not express that in a very obvious way. Because how many times I felt that being a basic scientist and saying that I was a very religious man was something very antagonic. I've done that. Maybe not denying is the right word, but not saying it or not presenting myself as that. Or having fun of a joke that was poked on religious people. I was like, yeah, that's kind of funny. That's not. Then, after what happened with that day in the bus, I realized that the message for me was quite different. And the message was, Marco, that's quite nice that you know about the light and all that stuff, you know about the history, but what are you doing? Now, from that time on, I was very open about Spiritism, about who I am, about what I believe, and I have no problem saying this to anyone, anywhere. And what happened after that? At least in this year alone, at least 5 individuals came to my office to talk to me about Spiritism. Believe it or not. At my university office. I'm not, I don't do any religious stuff there. But all of a sudden, just by the fact that I'm not hiding my light anymore, the mission starts to, send
Come to you.
individuals for help. And I accept them. I was saying no to them even before I say no to them, because just by my own, the way I presented, I was blocking off any ability of the divine providence to send me cases for help. Now, just with the fact that I accepted it, it happens. Because in spirituality, that's what they're doing. They're right beside me here saying, are you ready for more? Okay, let's do that. Let's send more. Let's do it. Keep doing it. The mission never stops. The light never goes out. We may hide it, but it's still there. Right? And some of those individuals that came to me, they work in university. Some of them are professors. Some of them are, other people. And we end up striking very important conversations about many challenges in their lives. And how religion can help. And, or simply, for example, answering one of the questions that one of my colleagues had, why do you talk about Jesus? Just answering that question. And I had no problem doing it anymore. And now everyone knows. Some people call me a pastor now. It's like, oh, you're like a pastor. No, not there. But, I don't have any problem talking about my own, spirituality or, my spiritism or anything. Right? And actually, it's interesting because I have colleagues from the university that come here, just not because I had anything to do with this. They were spiritists back from Brazil, but they come here and we have the same challenges sometimes. But now I accepted it, and I think at least I'm not there yet, but I'm on the right track, right path. I'm getting there, like one tiny little step at a time, and the challenges keep coming, and you have to. And do you know how you can actually change people's perspective on religion in general? I'll give you one example. It's not a lot about what you tell them. It's, for example, how you act when you have a challenge. So I'll give you another example. So one day I was in hospital, and our son Daniel was in hospital for about a week. But he was doing well at that point. But we've been through very difficult times. And one of my colleagues in the hospital came to me and said, Marco, how are you doing? And she was very sad. You can see that. She's like, actually, I'm doing very well. I'm great. She's like, how's that even possible? And she knew exactly what we've been through. She's like, I know what you've been through. I'm like, I know. But my faith is what gives me this energy. Period. Because if I'm only here to talk about medical diagnoses and treatments, then yeah, that's right, I will be completely devastated. Right? But I'm not. Because I know what future holds for me in the future lives. I know why I'm going through this. And I know what I have to do. Why should I be sad? Why? And then she comes back to me and said, Marco, I was going to tell you that I was having a bad day. I'm not. I'm actually having a great day. I changed her. Not because of what I said, but the way she realized I behaved upon a challenge. That was my light at that time. Just showing your resilience. That's part of your light. Showing your faith. But not a faith like, oh, I have faith, No, it's like a real faith. A real faith that you really believe to a point that people can see that in you. They don't need to ask you about your faith. It doesn't matter what you believe. So that's another example of how I was able to recognize that and change. And I think the challenge for all of you will be to recognize those situations in your own lives. How many times we missed the opportunity of shining our light, hiding it when it was appropriate. We can't do this. That's exactly what Jesus is telling us. And He is the living lamp. He came incarnate in this planet so He could shine His own light directly, close by, physically to all of us. He's still doing. He was part of the group of spirits that created our own galaxy. He's been with us long before we even existed. But obviously, being here with us, He was able to actually draw our attention to our very humanized eyes, which is that's what I was told that story in the beginning. We can only see this little tiny thing, and we only believe what we see. So there you go. He comes in, presents Himself, and tells us, like, I am the light. Here, I am the light. But you are the light of this world, and you're the ones responsible for making sure that we're going to advance collectively as a society. Right? So, and then He says, instead, a lamp is to be placed on a stand where it gives lights to everyone in the house. Okay, Mark, so you're saying that I have to stand up, go to the Young and Dundas Square, go up in one of those signs and put a flashlight on my head and say, hey guys, I am the light, Jesus is here, just follow me. No, of course not. Obviously not. That's not what we're talking about. But making sure that your tiny little light, just like mine, is always bright. That's the first step. Be positive, be faithful, be helpful, be charitable. Just be a nice person. That's how your light is already shining. And that's exactly what Matthew is telling us when Jesus said, we cannot hide this light anymore. Okay. So that's what I had to talk about today. I think in general we've seen a lot on this same passage many times before, and I think it goes back to a point that when myself I realized the fact that although I've read this 100 million times by now, recognizing it and putting it into practice is still far, 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 far away. And I think that's the point where we are right now. We can't delay that anymore. Believe me, if we don't do it now, we'll come back and we'll be forced to do it somehow. Because we'll be presented with challenges that we're not going to be able... The challenge I had was like in existence. It was not even a challenge. The challenges I have are tiny, small. And I don't complain. Why? Because I know the reason why I have the challenges I have today, and every one of us have it. Everyone has challenges. Right? Facebook, the happy smiles of Facebook, they don't mean anything, and we know that. There's research showing that now. That they make people more sick and depressed now because they've started to realize that everyone is happy eating that beautiful meal that I don't know where they took that picture from, but I don't eat that. Or the beautiful places they go all the time, and the happy smiles and happiness here and there. That's not real, right? All of us have challenges, huge ones, right? But how we position ourselves against those challenges and how we cope and deal with them and how we thrive on succeeding on doing something positive, that's the light that we're talking about here. And even if you don't say or do anything, just by yourself, if you're able to be a better person, you're already doing it. Your light is out there already. Everyone can see it. The reason why I started studying Spiritism because one of my good friends that's actually now coming to this center too, one of them, no matter what situation I met her, she was always shining her light. Now I can see it. At that time I didn't know. But I was talking to Joyce one day, and it's like, why does people in Spiritism, it doesn't matter where we meet them, there's a couple of friends we had, they're like, their house on fire. It's like, you know what? That's fine. We'll be fine. We'll get another house done. That's fine. We'll get it there. There's more to that. You know, there's always more. There's always positive. There's always a future life. There's always an explanation. There's always something positive out of anything. I could not grasp my head around that idea ever. That's why I started to study. It's like, okay, this guy's, or either they're completely nuts, or you know, there's something there that I need to understand. So they were shining their lights, although they were not telling me anything about light or anything. They were shining their lights. And that's how I came to them. Just like a lot of people come to me now. And that's how a lot of people come to you guys. Isn't that true? And we still come to other people too. It's not that we're like, oh, we're great now. We don't need anyone. Like, yeah. You know, of course not. But I think that's the message we need to take. And I would say, if I can summarize this, is like, don't delay it anymore. Make sure your light is always shining. Thanks, guys. My light's still here.
Don't give up.
These guys, you know,
I'm starting to hide already.
so many lectures is still try to skip away. All right, so we do have time for a few questions. Anyone in the internet, we have Erica there. So if you have any questions, please let us know. Or any comment, anyone.
I'm ashamed of myself.
No, don't be ashamed. I mean, believe me, we're better than we were yesterday. I can tell you that. But we still have a lot to go. And I think, you know what, that realization is that probably the biggest thing Spiritism gave me. That's okay. Come hear my light. Yeah. It's probably that realization that there's a lot to do. That's already a huge step in your pathway. Huge. Because most of us are still in the step where we don't even know what's wrong with us. If you already have a hint of what you could do, that's already an enormous barrier that was conquered. So I think that's a good start. No? Okay.
Anyone else? All right, so thank you very much, Michael.
Let's go, buddy.
Now you can sit. All right, so we're gonna get prepared for the passes. For those watching us through the internet, thanks so much for your participation. We hope to see you guys again next Sunday.